what just arrived in the mail is da 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 Practical Ethics and Profound Emptiness. And so it's written by Kenser Jampa Tekchok, also known as Geshe Jampa Tekchok. He was a Geshe, and then he became the abbot of Sarajay Monastery, so he became Khenpo Jampa Tekchok. And then when he retired from the abbotship, he became the former abbot, Kenser Jampa Tekchok. Okay, so I met him first, I think it must have been 1982, and before I met him, he had been the resident Geshe at Manjushri Institute in England. And as the story goes, because he was friends with Lama Yeshe from days in Sarah, so Lama had asked him to go teach at this Dharma center. And Geshe-la said, but these people don't know anything. Why do they need a Geshe to go there? Just some person who has a little bit of education can go and teach them, because the Geshes have studied years and years and years. It's kind of like sending a PhD to teach kindergarten. Yeah. And so Lama said, just you wait. Anyway, later on, it said that Geshe-la went back to Lama and said, oh, now I know why you needed to send Geshes to the centers. Because Westerners, even though we don't know anything about the Dharma, we don't sit and listen respectfully like Asians. We ask questions. And we ask questions that many Asians would not ask because they've grown up in a Buddhist culture. Yeah. So we say things like, how do you know rebirth exists? How do you know Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha exist? Yeah. What's this thing about Mount Meru and 4 continents? Science has disproved that. So, we say things like that. And so if you're not well educated, and if you haven't really tamed your own mind, you're going to have problems with these kind of disciples. Yeah. So Geshe-la, managed to work with us. So he was in England for a few years. Then he came to Nalanda Monastery in France in 1982, and that's where I first met him. And so I studied with him for 3 very intense years at Nalanda. I was at Dorji Pummel Monastery. We used to go over there every day for teachings, almost every day. And he's a remarkable teacher, totally remarkable. The way he explains things, and the way he handles questions. Because me, I ask a lot of questions. So I was sitting front center. That's kind of where my seat was. My hand was always, but Geshe-la, that doesn't make much sense. How can you say this? How can you? So, I was always asking questions. And then Venerable Steve, who you know too, then he was sitting over there. So he and I sometimes got into contests of who could ask Geshe-la more questions, because we both had the same questions and we both pushed different points. Okay? But he enjoyed it. Geshe-la enjoyed it. Except at one point he stopped looking at me. And I got the idea that I was interrupting too much with my questions, so maybe I should kind of tame it and let him teach a little bit. But he was always, I would go make appointments just to go see him and ask Dharma questions. He was always so helpful and so enthusiastic about teaching. He really loved it. You could see, because his classes were fantastic. And in terms of practice, you could see it also. After I left and went back to Asia and then all the other places I wound up before I came to the Abbey. I would go to India, to see him, because after some time he went back to India, back to Sarah. So I would go to visit him. And, I would go, and he, here he is. He's the abbot of Sarah J. So, everybody is like super respectful. And, and I went in to see him. And, he was wearing his underskirt. He didn't like wearing his shemdap when he didn't have to, because he was a really big man. And so putting on the belt was like, difficult. And so I would go in there, and then he would make me tea instead of me making him tea, even though I would offer. And then, when I went to visit him, then he would cook. He liked to cook. And he would offer food. I would be so embarrassed. I went with, sometimes I would go with another friend, and then also Venerable Steve would come, and the three of us would be there. And Kenser Rinpoche made us sit in chairs. We could not sit on the floor, even though we wanted to. He would serve us food. And then he sat on his bed on the floor and watched us eat and rejoiced in us eating. Oh, yeah! It's like, no, this is supposed to be the opposite way. He wouldn't hear it. He was extremely humble. And I remember one day we were eating, and his room was upstairs, and a beggar came up, because once in a while beggars would come through the monastery. A beggar walked up the stairs to his room, and Geshe-la went outdoors to, out on the veranda to meet him. And then we see Geshe-la going back into his room and coming out with a big, warm, blanket, which apparently this beggar had said, "I'm cold, I need a blanket." And Geshe-la just went and took one of his blankets and gave it to this man. My friend who had come with me, a laywoman, was like, she was just totally blown away by this. But this is the way he was, yeah. And he was abbot of Sarah at a time when it was very difficult. There were a lot of things going on at the monastery, and he was a very good negotiator, yeah, and really managed to soothe people and help them work together, yeah. But he didn't put up with any nonsense. He had a good sense of humor, excellent teacher, did not put up with nonsense. Okay? So if you were, talking nonsense or behaving nonsense, you knew about it. Okay? But really fantastic. So he passed away some years ago, and I had asked him, because he wanted to do a book about emptiness and asked me to edit it. So this was some years ago. And so he gave a bunch of teachings. Venerable Steve translated, somebody transcribed, and then I made it into Insight into Emptiness, which came out by Wisdom a few years ago. And then after that, I asked him, because he was getting old, he stopped teaching, and I said, may I have your permission to have some of your other transcripts of oral teachings and make them into books? And so he gave me his permission. And so the first thing that I did was I tracked down, with Venerable Steve's help, the transcript from his teachings of Nagarjuna's Precious Garland. Yeah. And so 2 years ago in our winter retreat, I just completely plugged myself into doing nothing but editing that. There were over 50 teachings that he had given. At least 50, maybe, I can't remember, maybe 60 or something, but a lot. Okay? And it was just such a joy going through it. Of course, I had to rewrite a lot of things because it was an oral translation, and you have to make it, suitable for a written book. And then Venerable Sangha Khandra, who was a very good Dharma friend of mine, also one of Geshe-la's teaching students, then she read it and made some suggestions and corrections. And, and I would send back and forth, messages through Steve, questions to ask, and so on. And, and then gave it to Wisdom Publications. And so here it is, finally. The book is, this teaching and Nagarjuna's teaching, first of all, and then Kenser Rinpoche's commentary on it are both just extraordinary. Nagarjuna, the way he... it's just amazing how, we've been through this, but you can see that he weaves in very practical matters, practical ethics, and profound emptiness, And especially at the beginning of the book, he starts out with, ethical conduct so that because he's addressing this to a king, so that the king can have a good rebirth. And then immediately he gets into the ultimate truth and emptiness with some of the, there's so many verses in Nagarjuna's text that are frequently quoted, in other scriptures. And then here you are getting it actually in his own text with the preceding verses and the following verses. Yeah. And so Nagarjuna talks about, ethics, then emptiness, and then you have a whole chapter on royal policy and good government. Yeah? Because he's talking to the king. And for Nagarjuna's mind, everything fits in the Dharma. And so he talks to the king about how to select good ministers, how to support monasteries, what to do about prisoners and people who break the law, what to do about military. It's just incredible. Yeah. So, maybe I'll save that for the next one, looking at the table of contents a little bit. But, anyway, it's totally a fantastic book. And I really highly recommend it. And now we have, I don't know how many videos of my commentary on Kenser Rinpoche's commentary, on Gyaltsabje's commentary, and Nagarjuna, who's commentating on the Buddha, online at tutanchudran.org.